What did you find in terms of context with Latino children as opposed to their peers?
We have 2 children starting kindergarten in 1 year, and one of them shows up 3 months late. That's what we basically found. We found that Latino children begin kindergarten roughly 3 months behind their white peers in early math skills.
Why is that?
There's lots of different reasons, but in a nutshell, one of the big drivers is poverty. Latino children are twice as likely to be in poverty, and when we look at the contributors to this gap, poverty is one of the largest contributors. But there's other things. For example, participation in childcare. Latino children are less likely to participate in center-based or preschool programs, the types of programs that have an educational component that help to prepare them for kindergarten. They also tend to have fewer books at homes, and that is also associated with sort of the development of early math skills. So it's a variety of different factors, but poverty is really the leading culprit, so to speak.
What are the implications when you have children that are starting so far behind in math? What are the problems down the road?
The reason that it matters so much that Latino children are starting behind or lagging behind their white peers is because of both demographics and tomorrow's workforce. So today, Latino children are 1 in 4 of all tomorrow's workforce. And if we want our workforce to be competitive for tomorrow's global economy, which will increasingly require training and skills in science, technology, engineering, math, what we call STEM, we need our children to be prepared for that. If one of our largest and fastest growing racial ethnic minority groups among children is going to be lagging behind, that's going to have tremendous implications for our workforce and our standing internationally with other countries.
When you're talking about STEM, could you run through a list of some of the jobs, some of the future careers that we're talking about?
Really, it runs the gamut. So we've got computer technology, all of the computer jobs, IT, engineering, whether it's in factories. You need engineers to develop the machines that will be running the factories. Whether it's running our electricity, those are engineers. You need engineering support to be running our city's electric grid.
So what can parents do?
The good news is that parents can do a lot. And the first thing to remember is that parents are our children's first and most important teachers. And that while recognizing that we all lead very busy lives, there's much that we can do in our everyday activities. So whether it's when we're going to the grocery store and we're loading up the apples, counting the number of apples that we're putting in the cart, when we're cooking, bringing our children into the kitchen and having them help us to measure. We're all teaching them very important skills about what's bigger, what's smaller, learning them about teaching them numbers. So really taking those everyday opportunities and teaching them those basic early math skills that will help them as they start kindergarten.
At what age should they start?
You cannot start early enough. So we know from research that children as young as 6 months already have rudimentary early math skills. So they're starting to recognize shapes, they're starting to recognize sizes, so for example, bigger or smaller. So there's really no early age that you can do. And so for example, when I have a kindergartner, and when he was a little baby, what I would do is, when I was changing his diapers, we'd count the number of little snaps on his onesies. We'd count the number of stairs that we'd have to go up the stairs to get to the changing table. So just incorporating it in your everyday routine.
You had mentioned books in hand. Can you tell me what kind of books they should have?
What we found is that having more children's books at home seems to be associated with having better math skills when when Latino children start kindergarten. We're not exactly sure what the mechanism underlying that relationship may be, but it's likely that having children's books is associated with reading at night, and maybe that those are additional opportunities that parents are taking to transmit those early math skills. So for example, when you're counting Goodnight Moon, looking for counting the number of objects, or when you're Hungry Caterpillar, talking about which is the biggest fruit in the picnic, that kind of thing.
Is there any indication how long it would take to catch children up to their peers, whether it will take a generation? researchers looked down the road to see what it would take to catch them up?
So the good news is that we also know that Latino children learn at the same rate as white children. So they're learning, they have the ability and capability of learning just as quickly, but they're starting behind. So it's always a catch-up game. So what you really want to do to close that gap is make sure that we don't even have one in the first place when we start kindergarten. And that means making sure that we have greater access to, for example, early care and education programs that include an educational component that help to foster those types of math skills.
I'd wanted to ask you is how you and your colleagues got the science behind this, how you got to these findings. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. So we used a national study that was conducted by the Department of Education. It includes, it's a nationally representative survey of all kindergartners starting in the 2010-2011 school year. It includes over 10,000 students, and we have roughly included over 2,000 Latino students in our study.
And I know we talked about the findings right off the bat, and that's where you came up with the numbers.
Yes, and that's what we used to do our analysis. It is one of the most recent data sets on what is happening, how how kindergartners are faring as they enter kindergarten, and how they track over time. We follow, these kindergartners are followed over time to 5th grade.
Are there plans for further studies? What further studies are needed?
There is plans to continue to follow them possibly over further years, but I think one of the biggest additional work is really needed to understand, especially within the Latino population, different subgroups. So for example, how Cuban Americans, Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans may be faring. And also to understand those mechanisms by which, for example, what we see with having more books at home. Is it the reading? Is it a specific type of practice or activity that parents are doing to help us better understand how we can better support parents through policies and programs?
If there were one takeaway message you would want parents to hear from this report, what would it be?
What I would want parents to take away is that they are the first and lifelong teachers of their children, and that they can make a difference. And it's by taking simple steps in their everyday lives that they really help to build those math skills.
Why is this important to us as a nation?
So 2 reasons. One is that today Latino children are 1 in 4 of all children. Latino children are the fastest and largest racial ethnic minority group among children, and they represent tomorrow's workforce. So we want our workforce to be well prepared to meet the demands of our increasingly global economy. And the second is for our global competitiveness. We want to make sure that the U.S. continues to be well positioned to be globally competitive for our increasingly technological workforce.
What kind of jobs do you really need those math skills for?
I would say that we really need them increasingly so in almost all jobs. So whether it's the obvious, for example, a math professor or a math teacher, to those who run our city's electric grids, to folks like myself who use math in our everyday jobs to do the kinds of analysis that lead to the kind of studies that we've been talking about, to your computer IT folks. So really in every job, I think increasingly a need for math and engineering is going to be needed.